A single joke. 30 seconds of laughter at an award ceremony. And now, the Trump of the United States is threatening to unleash his legal army against a comedian who's already walking away from the spotlight.
But here's the twist nobody saw coming. This isn't just about hurt feelings or damaged pride. This is about a legal gamble so dangerous it could rip open a door the former president desperately needs to keep shut. And what's behind that door?
3 million documents, thousands of mentions, and questions that have haunted American politics for years. What you're about to discover will change how you see power, speech, and the dangerous game being played in our courtrooms right now. Because when the most powerful man in the country declares war on a punchline, someone's made
a catastrophic miscalculation, and the clock is already ticking. Let's rewind to February 1st, 2026, the Grammy Awards, millions watching worldwide. Trevor Noah stands on that iconic stage for what he has announced will be his final time as host. The energy is electric. Billie Eilish has just won Song of the Year for Wildflower. The audience is buzzing with excitement. Then Noah does what comedians do. He makes a joke. Not a vicious attack, not a conspiracy theory. Just a layered, satirical quip that connects 3 dots. Trump's public obsession with acquiring Greenland, the notorious Epstein Island that no longer exists, and a former president named Bill Clinton. The audience erupts in laughter. Noah grins and delivers the kicker. "I told you it's my last year. What are you going to do about it?" The applause fades. The show continues. And for most viewers, it's just another memorable Grammy moment, sharp, edgy, perfectly timed comedy from a master of the craft. But somewhere, someone is not laughing. Fast forward to the next morning. 10:01 a.m. While most of America is still processing the Grammy performances and winners, a notification explodes across Truth Social. This isn't a casual dismissal. This isn't a presidential eye roll. This is 300 words of pure legal warfare. The message is crystal clear. Trevor Noah has crossed a line, and now there will be consequences. The language is personal, aggressive, and unmistakable in its intent. Words like loser, pathetic, and talentless pepper the text. But those insults are just the appetizer. The main course? A promise to deploy lawyers, file lawsuits, and extract significant payment. The Post name drops previous legal victories. A major news anchor, a legendary television network, settlements totaling tens of millions of dollars. The message to Noah is simple. You think you're untouchable? Ask the others how that worked out. But here's where this story takes its first shocking turn. Because while the world focuses on the threat itself, almost nobody is asking the question that actually matters. Why would someone threaten to sue over a joke that could trigger the very investigation they can't afford to have? Let's just talk about recent history, the kind that gets buried under headlines, but tells you everything you need to know. In the past 18 months, 2 of America's most powerful media institutions have written checks for a combined $31 million. Not because they lost in court, not because judges ruled against them, but because a former president threatened legal action, and the cost of fighting even with truth on their side became too expensive to bear. One network paid $15 million. Another paid $16 million. Both cases involved statements that were, by most legal standards, defensible. The words used were technically imprecise, yes, but substantially rooted in documented facts and legal findings. Yet both organizations made a calculation. Is defending constitutional principles worth years of litigation, mountains of legal fees, and the distraction from their core mission? They decided it wasn't. And here's what that teaches every journalist, every comedian, every critic in America. It doesn't matter if you're right. It doesn't matter if the First Amendment protects you. What matters is whether you can survive the war of attrition. This is the playbook. This is the strategy. And it's been working beautifully until now. Because Trevor Noah might just be the wrong target. Here's the detail that makes this entire situation explode. 3 days before Trevor Noah stood on that Grammy stage, something unprecedented happened. January 30th, 2026. The Department of Justice releases a staggering volume of documents, over 3 million pages, related to a federal investigation that's haunted America's elite for years. The Deputy Attorney General holds a press conference, announces full compliance with transparency legislation, and presents it as a moment of governmental accountability. But within hours, something strange starts happening. Congressional representatives, particularly those who authored the transparency legislation, begin raising red flags. They point out that the DOJ's own assessment identified over 6 million potentially relevant pages. So where's the other half? Questions multiply. Accusations of selective disclosure fly. The administration insists they've met every legal requirement, but critics smell a cover-up. And buried in those 3 million released pages, a name appears more than 3,000 times. Let that number sink in for a moment. 3,000 mentions in a single investigation file. That's not a casual connection. That's a documented relationship spanning years, interactions, communications, and associations. The files include photographs. They include email exchanges. They include flight records showing private jet travel. They include testimony from household staff. They include statements from investigators noting the frequency and nature of social interactions. None of this is new, exactly. Pieces of this story have been public for years. But having it all compiled, official, and released by the government itself, that changes the narrative. That makes it undeniable. So now picture the timeline. Day 1. Government releases massive file dump containing thousands of references. Day 2. Political opponents accuse administration of hiding the other half. Day 3. Comedian makes joke connecting the dots everyone can now see. Day 4. Legal threat demanding the comedian retract and prepare for litigation. Does that sequence seem strategic to you? Or does it seem desperate? Let's get into the mechanics of what would happen if this lawsuit actually gets filed, because this is where the whole strategy falls apart spectacularly. Defamation law is complex, but certain principles are ironclad. When you're suing someone for damaging your reputation, you need to prove they made a false statement of fact that harmed you. That's the foundation. But when you're a public official, especially the President of the United States, the bar gets astronomically higher. You can't just prove the statement was false. You have to prove something called actual malice. This is a specific legal standard established in a landmark Supreme Court case from 1964. It means you must demonstrate that the person making the statement either knew it was false or showed reckless disregard for the truth. And here is the beautiful legal irony. You can't prove actual malice for something that is obviously satire. Think about it. When Trevor Noah stood on that stage and made a joke comparing Greenland to Epstein's island, did anyone in that audience or watching at home believe he was reporting verified intelligence? Did anyone think he had access to secret travel logs he was now revealing? Of course not. They laughed. Laughter is literal evidence that the audience understood this as humor, not journalism. There's precedent for this that's absolutely devastating to any potential lawsuit. Back in 1988, the Supreme Court heard a case involving a magazine that published an outrageously offensive parody about a prominent religious figure. The parody suggested something so shocking, so deliberately absurd, that it could never be mistaken for truth. The religious figure sued. He was genuinely offended, understandably so. But the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that no matter how harsh, how offensive, or how unfair a parody might be, it cannot be defamation if reasonable people would recognize it as satire. The Chief Justice wrote that robust political debate inevitably produces speech that isn't always reasoned or moderate, and attempting to police that speech would subject every political, cartoonist and satirist to endless lawsuits without any actual proof of harm. So applying this to Noah's Grammy joke, the legal defense is bulletproof. This was satire at an entertainment event, understood by millions as comedy, not factual reporting. But wait, there's an even bigger problem. Here's what happens the moment a defamation lawsuit gets filed. Both sides get access to a legal process called discovery. Discovery is the most powerful weapon in litigation. It allows lawyers to demand documents, communications, records, essentially anything relevant to the case. And the other side must comply. Now imagine you're defending Trevor Noah, someone suing your client for making a joke about their connection to a controversial figure. What's your strategy? Simple. You prove the joke had a basis in documented reality. That means Noah's, his legal team, can subpoena every single communication between the plaintiff and the controversial figure in question. Every email, every text message, every phone record, every flight log, every photograph, every witness who ever saw them together. They can depose household staff. They can question business associates. They can examine financial records. They can demand testimony under oath about the nature, frequency, and extent of the relationship. And remember those 3 million pages the government just released? Every single one becomes fair game for questioning. Sir, on page 2847, there's an email dated March 2003. Can you explain this reference? This photograph shows you at a specific property. How many times did you visit? The flight logs indicate multiple trips. What was the purpose of each journey? Hour after hour, day after day. Under oath. On the record. This is the nuclear option that any defamation lawsuit would trigger. And it's precisely why experienced lawyers would advise against filing. Because here's the ultimate irony. In trying to punish someone for a joke, you create the very investigation you're trying to avoid. So if the legal strategy is this obviously flawed, why make the threat at all? Because this isn't about law, it's about power. The goal isn't to win a trial. The goal is to create fear. To make journalists think twice. To make comedians soften their material. To make every potential critic calculate whether their criticism is worth the risk. And up until now, it's been working. Those two major settlements, $31 million total, they send a message to every newsroom in America. Even if you rewrite, even if you have the truth on your side, we can make this so expensive and so exhausting that you eventually pay us to make it stop. That's not justice. That's a war of attrition. And in a war of attrition, the side with deeper pockets usually wins. But there is a fatal flaw in applying this strategy too. Comedians, especially comedians who they already announced they're walking away. Trevor Noah has nothing to lose. He's not protecting a news organization's reputation. He's not worried about access to sources. He's not concerned about advertiser relationships. He made a joke at his final hosting gig in front of millions of witnesses who all understood it was satire. If there's ever been a perfect test case for First Amendment protections, this is it. Step back and look at what's really happening here. Across America right now, journalists are making editorial decisions based not on truth, but on legal risk. Comedians are softening their material. Commentators are choosing their words carefully, not for accuracy, but for legal safety. This is the chilling effect in action. When the process becomes the punishment, when litigation itself, win or lose, becomes prohibitively expensive, speech gets suppressed without a single court ruling against it. The founders understood this danger. That's why the First Amendment isn't just about protecting speech the government likes. It's specifically designed to protect the speech that makes powerful people uncomfortable. Criticism of leaders, satire of officials, investigative journalism that exposes corruption. These aren't pleasant extras in a democracy. They're essential functions. And the Supreme Court recognized long ago that protecting these functions means giving speakers breathing room. It means accepting that some statements might be imprecise, some jokes might be harsh, some criticism might be unfair. Because the alternative is a system where every critical word triggers. Potential legal warfare is incompatible with free society. So here we are, A legal threat has been made. The world is watching. And several questions hang in the balance. Will a lawsuit actually be filed? Or was the threat itself the entire point? If it gets filed, will it be fought or settled? Will we see another multi-million-dollar payout for the sake of avoiding discovery? The joke that sparked this confrontation will become the least interesting part of the story. Here's why this matters far beyond celebrity drama or political theater. The precedent being set right now will determine what kind of country we live in. Can powerful figures use the legal system to silence criticism? Can the threat of expensive litigation suppress speech, even when the law protects it? Can satire survive in an environment where every joke might cost millions to defend? These aren't abstract questions. They're playing out in real time, in courtrooms and newsrooms across America. And the Trevor Noah situation is just the most visible example. Behind the scenes, countless stories go unreported because journalists fear legal retaliation. Countless jokes go unwritten because comedians calculate the risk. Countless criticisms go unspoken because citizens see what happens to those who speak up. That's the real victory for this strategy, not the cases that get filed, but the speech that never happens in the first place. So as this situation unfolds, ask yourself, what would you do? If you were Trevor Noah, would you fight or settle? If you were his lawyer, would you see this as a nightmare or an opportunity? If you were a judge, would you dismiss this immediately or let it proceed? And if you were just a citizen watching this unfold, would you see this as one powerful person's hurt feelings or as a fundamental threat to the freedoms that make democracy possible? Because make no mistake, the answer to those questions will echo far beyond this single case. Every journalist watching will learn whether truth is a defense or just an expensive delay. Every comedian will learn whether satire is protected or just legally risky. Every citizen will learn whether criticizing power is a right or a luxury only the wealthy can afford. The joke was 30 seconds long. The laughter lasted maybe a minute, but the consequences? Those could reshape American democracy for generations. 3 million documents, 3,000 mentions, 3 days between release and joke, 300 words of legal threat, and one question that nobody in power wants answered. What happens when you actually open discovery on the relationship everyone's been talking about for years? Trevor Noah made a joke, but the punchline might be on someone else entirely. The truth is already out there, in government files, in testimony, in photographs, and flight logs, and witness statements. The question isn't whether it exists. The question is whether filing a lawsuit will force everyone to look at it all over again. And if that happens, the person who threatened the lawsuit might discover that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. This isn't just about a comedian and a president. This is about power, accountability, and the right to speak truth or jokes about those who govern us. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and pay attention to what happens next. Because in the battle between a punchline and a legal threat, sometimes the joke has the last laugh.